Hey Sunrise, it's Andrew with your small group questions for this week as we dive in now to Genesis 31. So we're working through the end now of our Jacob narrative. So we're getting to the end of his time in Haran. And so we come to this passage where we now begin to see Jacob leave the land. And so, of course, the very first thing is we have this mirror image back to chapter 12. We saw the call of Abraham out of Haran, and now we see the call of Jacob. Now, what are some of the similarities and differences in these calls? What's the significance clearly of it in our passage? And just picking up on some of the different wording. The wording here is different than that passage, and there's some key things that you can pick up on and discuss just what God has done over the time of the patriarchs in this section. And then from there, we go to Jacob being called, as we saw out, and then discussing with his wives. So he calls his wives to him to ultimately try to sway them to go with him, to leave with him. So what do you make of Jacob's description of the call of God? Is this him embellishing a bit about what's happened over the last years to win their approval? Is it an accurate portrayal of a dream he's been given? What does this show us about Jacob? So there's a lot of different things you can work through when reading this text. So again, depends on how you view Jacob. Kind of helps underscore what you're seeing in this text. So what do you think about this? And then from there, what do you then make of the response from Leah and Rachel? Like, they have a response to his large pronouncement of why they have to leave. What do you make of their response, of their thoughts about their dad, and then their response to go? What stands out in those two aspects of their conversation here? What they say to Jacob? Again, what does it tell them about their experience over the last very least 13, 14 years? Just continue to work through this over a time period. And then from this, what do we make of the inclusion? So they leave, they go. We have the fact that Rachel steals the household gods. What do you make of this narrative function of Rachel stealing the gods? Why is this in here? What does it then tell us about Rachel? What does it tell us about Jacob and Laban and that whole interaction that comes about because of this? How does this move the events forward and, again, bring to a head Jacob and Laban's conflict all around these household gods? So what do you make of these things? What is God continually showing us in the text through this about himself, through these things? So then what stands out in the Jacob-Laban exchange? What are some of the key things that you can think about in how Jacob responds, how Laban responds, their back and forth, continually showing us more and more about who these men are and their interaction? So then leads us to verse 42. 42 hits us with this reality that God is with Jacob. That's his pronouncement. And how is his pronouncement backed up with the rest of Scripture? How do we see this happening? And again, how do we even see that going forward to be a true statement that Jacob says? How is that even an encouragement to us in light of the Jacob narrative that this testimony is true, that God is with him, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac is with him? What does that mean to us when we're reading this text? How does it encourage us looking forward again in light of Christ, the true one who has come and is by our side through all of life when meeting our own different experiences like Laban? And then through that, how does the end of our text mirror other ends to some of our patriarch stories? Again, so here we have this another cutting of a covenant. We've seen each of the other two do it. What do we see this? What's the similarities? What's the differences here in this one specifically? And then, of course, we have the end where he then blesses them. What do you make of the blessing of Laban to his daughters and grandchildren? So again, there's a lot. It's a big text. 32 is not short, but it is packed full of God's work with, again, still sinful people who God is working through and ultimately blessing along the way. Hope you'll spend some time in the text. Again, hear the word proclaimed on Sunday, and then again, working through some of the depths of what's going on in these words throughout the week in small group. Hope to see you guys on Sunday.